Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, December the 11th. Welcome to our video commentary. Today, we're going to talk about the news media. I'm sure you have been following some of the reports about some of the mistakes. It's been rather blatant the last week. You had Brian Ross with ABC literally reporting that General Kelly had told then candidate President Trump about something having to do with the Russians. Then it turned out that that was wrong, that it was during, of course, the transition when it's completely normal for a president-elect to tell a member of his team to meet with the Russians. So that was a pretty bad one. That was horrible. It ended up causing Brian Ross to be suspended for 4 weeks without pay. Then came the story about the German bank. And that whole story, from the moment I heard that, I had a feeling that it was something weird about it. There was something strange about it. Well, we now know that it wasn't true either. And then that whole thing last Friday with CNN and the WikiLeaks, and it turned out that they had the wrong date. Bottom line, they've made three big mistakes over the last week, and it doesn't look good for the media. And of course, what's going on is what everybody's asking. Well, I've got a couple of theories as to what I think is going on. The first one is, I'm going to be fair to the media on this one. I think something that is going on is that many of these news organizations are under a lot of pressure to be the first one to break something. And this is because, I think to some extent, because of social media. You now have a situation where, when I was growing up, you picked up the newspaper the next morning, and that's when you heard about something, or that's when you read a story. Now, of course, if something happens like this morning with the bombing in New York, it's all over media. It's all over the internet. By 10 o'clock, I mean, everything that you used to read the next day in the newspaper is now available instantly. So the reporters are under a lot of pressure to report something, to put something on the website that is as current as it can be. They're under a lot of pressure to break a story because they're competing. I mean, let's face it. They're competing with other organizations for the number of clicks and the number of entries into their website. So that, I think, is a big part of it here, the pressure to be first, the pressure to put the story out there first. So I think that that is part of the story. The second part of the story is something that we have seen developing during the Trump presidency, and that is, I think many of these news organizations are truly desperately looking for a story that makes Trump look bad. And the collusion story, which so far has turned out to be nothing but just a lot of hot air, I think has a lot of these reporters under a lot of pressure to show the editor that there's something here. And it all comes down to sources, of course, the sources you're relying on. And I hope that after this horrible week, where you've had three cases of some very bad reporting, not necessarily bad reporting, let me correct myself, bad sources, because these reporters, of course, get their information from sources inside the government or people who know or people close to they use all kinds of language to introduce these people. Well, I hope that after this week, that many reporters really begin to settle back a little bit and realize that they're hurting themselves. They're not hurting President Trump. They're hurting themselves when they put out stories like this. And I actually think, I think you're going to see many of the editors and many of these organizations really hit the brakes a little bit, because this constant having to take something back, this is not helping them at all. The only thing that a news organization has is credibility. The reason you turn it on is because of credibility. Now, once you turn it on, you may find that you like the new set of the studio or whatever. Or you may think that one of the girls reading the news is very pretty, or on the other hand, a lady may think that the young man reading the news is very handsome. I mean, that's all part of the consequence, but that's not the reason you tune in. You tune in because you believe that you're going to hear the truth. And when you don't get the truth, and when you don't trust the source, you don't turn it on, which is, of course, what is happening to many media sources. So my message to the media is just kind of get your act together a little bit, because you're not helping yourself at all with this constant having to correct all of these mistakes. I'll say one more thing about the media. One of the things that is really lacking in these newsrooms is a little bit of political diversity. When you look at all the studies of journalists in many of these newsrooms, the overwhelming majority of them are Democrats or people who vote Democrat. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that in principle. But when you let that get into your coverage, I think that's when you're doing yourself, as well as your organization, a terrible disservice. Thank you for watching. We have all of these commentaries over at YouTube. We also have them at my blog over at Twitter. Thank you very much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, everybody.